Well, the European Union leaders are meeting in Brussels to discuss defence as Russian aggression and the threat of a trade war with the US loom large over the bloc's security. NATO Secretary-General Mark Rutte, who's also there, sought to quell fears that Europe would have to face down a Russian threat without the help of Washington. But many leaders said that the EU would have to take more responsibility for its own security.
Establishing common defence priorities in Europe and finding the money for them is one of the top items on the agenda at the meeting. While many countries have reiterated the need to increase defence spending, the bloc is hoping it won't have to be as high as what US President Donald Trump is demanding, 5% of their national GDPs. European countries believe that they can cut costs dramatically by producing what they need for their collective defence themselves.
We need to consolidate our defence industry and develop common weapon systems. Our European defence industry could then use the same military systems and help member states' militaries become more interoperable.
Many EU countries currently see defence from their own national perspective and spend taxpayers' money on developing their own weapon systems. In the face of a common threat from Russia, experts say that approach is costly and ineffective.
One inefficiency is that Europeans use a lot of different tank systems, and therefore the unit cost of each purchase is higher than it would be if the number of systems were lower.
Instead of doubling up, experts say Europeans should act in concert and bank on each other's capabilities. And that's where the UK, a defence powerhouse, comes in.
The UK is not a member of the EU, but it is one of the two nuclear-armed states in Western Europe. It has trained tens of thousands of Ukrainian soldiers for the battlefield. It has also provided the war-torn country with long-range missiles, which have proven to be critical against Russia. The UK also leads a 10-nation joint expeditionary force that Ukraine is very keen to join and that has already been deployed to the Baltic Sea to deter Russia's hybrid attacks. Experts say a third country pact on defence with the UK could be useful.
London has recently inked bilateral deals with Berlin and Paris and is now eyeing a defence pact with the EU. But that is currently blocked by the French over fishing rights. British experts say the UK cannot help much without access to EU money.
And with the UK being outside of the EU at the moment, what that means is that when the EU comes up with ways to finance increased defence spending or increased defence initiatives, the UK is left out cold. And that's good for nobody, because the UK won't have access to these EU monies, and the EU won't have access to the UK's defence industrial base.
EU officials say coordinating Europe's defence industries could be a win-win and would also create employment opportunities. The biggest challenge for the European partners will be a familiar one: building consensus.
Well, let's look at that consensus with Petro Poroshenko, who's the fifth president of Ukraine and was head of state between 2014 and 2019. Welcome to DW.
Happy to see you again here in the studio of Deutsche Welle.
So now we're 3 years into Russia's full-scale invasion of your country. What do you make of your European partners' resolve and its support of Ukraine?
First of all, this is 11 years war. Since year 2014, when Russia attacked Crimea, and Russian regular troops attacks Ukrainian forces on Donbass. But 3 years, in less than 3 weeks' time, it would be the full-scale aggression. I just want to stress that I'm very proud that Ukraine and me as a president and Supreme Commander-in-Chief of Ukrainian Armed Forces create the new Ukrainian army, which surprised the world. Because in the February 2022, everybody, first of all, Putin, think that he will take Kiev within 3 days. Now it's 3 years.
Okay.
And we are fighting because of the unique bravery of Ukrainian armed forces, unique unity of Ukrainian people, and partnership and support of our cooperation with a free and democratic world.
All right. And so as far as Europe goes, and the support that your country has had from the European Union, what are you happiest about? What are you least happiest about?
First of all, we are very much happy that it is start to change the approach of European Union. This is not an assistance for Ukraine. This is the investment in the European security. This is the investment in the sustainable security situation on the continent. Because when Russia unprovocably attack Ukraine, this is ruin the all post-war security system which was based on Security Council of United Nations. Now everybody understands, if we do not stop Putin in Ukraine, if we do not support and invest in security, the war will knock the door at any European country, including
Do you think
Germany.
that threat has got sufficient weight yet with European leaders? Because they are still quibbling. We still don't have all of NATO members at 2%, even though Donald Trump is now talking about 5%. You say that if Putin gets his way, then he'll come knocking at Europe's door. Do you get the impression that European leaders understand that intellectually but don't really believe it?
They do not understand, some of them, intellectually, and do not believe. And we have, unfortunately, the same situation with the Ukrainian leaders before 24th of February 2022.
Who do you see dragging their feet most in Europe?
Look, the answer is the following. So, see on Russia. Russia switched the economy on the military rail. Russia increased several times production of the defense industry, artillery shell, long-range missile, and everything. Can you imagine that only North Korea supplied to Russia more artillery shell than all NATO supplied to Ukraine? And Russia and North Korea produced more artillery shell than whole NATO.
That's the problem. Talk to us about what you believe the solution to be. Who should be doing more in Europe in order to address this imbalance in armaments, as you've talked about?
You should understand that we now live in a different atmosphere, and the war cannot avoid your country. And if you do not switch the economy and the military rail, if you do not increase the production and make it cheaper, that means that Russia would be stronger than we are. This is a different type of the war.
Right, so that would be your message to European leaders.
Yeah,
the world has changed. You must now put yourself on a war footing.
Absolutely.
Okay.
If you supply Ukraine, if you will stop Putin in Ukraine, that would be our victory. If we not, that means please prepare your nation, your economy, and your armed forces to fight on your territory.
This is your territory being here in Europe, but then over across the Atlantic, we see President Trump pushing for this war to end. We had the US Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, also announcing this 90-day pause on foreign aid grants. Are you worried that a freeze on military aid will be next?
No, because that would be a strongest attack on the global leadership of the United States and then the European Union.
Okay, so
the US never would be ready to repeat once again Afghanistan.
You say that, except that that's not what we're hearing from the White House. And what we're hearing from the White House is that unless a deal is done and unless Ukraine toes the Washington line, then the money supplies get turned off.
Phil, I read it in the opposite way. The message of Trump is following. We send a very strong signal to Putin to finish the war. And you cannot find any other nation in the world who wants peace more than we Ukrainians.
Okay.
But the peace can be possible, only peace through strength. If you want a peace, you should motivate Putin to stop the war. If you want to motivate Putin to stop the war, you should supply to Ukraine more weapons, you should introduce more sanctions, you should send money from the freezing assets of Russian Federation to Ukraine.
And what if the cost of that peace is Ukraine ceding territory to Russia? What if that is the US terms of doing a deal with Russia?
First of all, I introduced the new principle since year 2014 when I was a president. Nothing about Ukraine without Ukraine. Now it is even more actual, nothing about Europe without Europe.
Yes, but you don't get to call this, though, do you? If the United States, if Donald Trump says, do a deal Ukraine, or we stop supplying you with arms, do a deal, Russia, or we get serious about coming after you. You have to do the deal. So you then have to ask yourself, what am I prepared to cede? What is Ukraine prepared to cede to Russia if Washington forces this issue?
Please don't put an equal, the aggressor and the victim.
Fine, I won't. But let's address the question that I asked you.
Again, we are ready for peace and for negotiation. We have a 5 non-compromise. First, non-compromise on our sovereignty and national identity, because under no circumstances we would be again the Russian colony. No compromise on the territorial integrity, because we never recognize Russian occupation of Ukrainian land. No compromise on sanctions, because this is the cut of the ability of the Putin to finance the war. Non-compromise on the financial assistance, and non-compromise on NATO and EU membership of Ukraine. Everything else is possible.
We're almost out of time. You say those are your 5 red lines, or what?
Or if Putin...
No, I don't mean that. I mean, if you don't get your 5 demands there, if you don't get your 5 non-compromises, then what? The fighting continues?
This is not Ukraine who do not accept that. This is Russia who should accept that. And if it is not happening, it is a role of the United States, because the Americans said, if Russia do not hear the message of the President Trump, and I know President Trump, I work with him for more than 3 years, he is a decisive person, that would be plan B. More weapons to Ukraine, more money to Ukraine, and more danger for Putin and for Russia.
We'll see if you're right. Thank you so much for joining us, President. Petro Poroshenko, 5th President of Ukraine. Thank you so much.
It's a pleasure.